Benjamin. Bonjour. So, Benjamin, could you just tell us, really in a nutshell, what you are doing exactly today? It's dedicated.
Yes, sure, Steve. Hi. I'm now a professional VC investor. So I'm a partner at Dedicated, and Dedicated is a venture capital, or more generally, private equity investment boutique located in the city center in Luxembourg. So we are three business partners, and together with our team, what we do is to source and to structure in club deals, VC or PE investment opportunities for private investors. So it's important to mention that we are skinning the game. So together with my business partners, we systematically invest our private money in the deals that we select. So maybe not everyone is really familiar with this world. So for those who are not in the business, what we do in simple words is basically that we find, we analyze, and we select what we believe are very interesting investment opportunities in non-listed companies. And then we share these investment opportunities with our network of private investors on a deal-by-deal basis. So we are not a fund.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. But I guess we can delve a little bit deeper on that one later on. But first, that is what you are doing today. And in order to be able to do this, what you're doing today, there was a certain, how shall I say, path you have gone through, a little bit the school of hard knocks. And we all, our fireside chatters, we would like to ask them, how did it come that you touched the entrepreneurial world? What made you step in, and how did you step in? Was it you jumped in the cold water immediately, or was it just the big toe you put in first? How did you come to this entrepreneurial world?
Interesting question. It's actually been a long journey to get there. Let me go back in time, if you allow me, Steve. As far as I can remember in the past, the world of entrepreneurship has always attracted me somehow. Deep inside, so I always wanted to be my own boss, to be free. But I had no idea what to do practically, which direction to go. So if that's okay with you, I'd like to go back and start chronologically, and it will all make sense along the journey. Back at school, I was not too bad in math and sciences. So I went to university and I became an engineer in Belgium. I'm Belgian. And in Belgium, the highest diploma you can get in this area is civil engineer, which is a quite high level diploma, a little bit. Some people say it's the equivalent of Polytech in France. And when you do that kind of study and you are reasonably successful, I had quite some good results. When you get to your final year of university studies, actually the main consulting companies come in the university campus and they approach you directly to try to hire you. And then during the last year of my university studies, there was really a game of seduction with these various companies. I remember that I was still 6 months before my final exams at university, and I was receiving gifts, from these companies. I was invited to amazing events, and I was just a student, so I was used to these very low-cost student parties, and then suddenly you get invited to prestigious events organized by these quite rich, of course, consulting companies, and you are like, wow, these guys are really professionals. They know how to attract and seduce young people. So I got trapped. They got me 3 months before the end of the year. I had already signed my working contract with Accenture. That's where I started. So this is how, from the start, I didn't become an entrepreneur, even if I somehow wanted to do that. And then I got somehow locked into this world for a period of 10 years. So let me tell you how it's a strange word because I had fantastic years and I learned so much, but how I escaped from that employee world, to become an entrepreneur. So I joined Accenture in 2001. And then I spent the following 10 years in multinational consulting companies before becoming an entrepreneur. So why 10 years? Why did I wait so long? Well, you have to understand that in these consulting companies, or at least at that time, I'm not sure it's still possible with the new generation, but 20 years back, the philosophy was really up or out. Or you are good enough to grow and you get promoted every 2-3 years, or you are terminated. There's no room for people who want to stabilize at certain level and have some kind of work-life balance. That's not the plan when you join these companies. So I was part of the motivated guys. I was good enough, so I got promoted on a regular basis. I grew in these companies, having more and more responsibilities over the years. And when you get promoted, you have more consideration. You have at some point a fancy title, like you become a director or VP something, and you of course earn more money, and you have other advantages. So your life becomes more and more comfortable,
And you also have more responsibility as well.
Yeah, I do. Of course, it goes together with the promotions, but I was ready for that. That has never been an issue for me. The thing is that I also earned more and more money. I also had more and more advantages, and then I got married, and then I got my kids. I bought a home, and when you have a mortgage, to pay off every month, when you have a family to feed, when you're used to a nice level of comfort, holidays, hotels, and so on, it becomes extremely complicated to risk everything to become an entrepreneur. That's the reality. So even if you still want to become your own boss, you have so much to lose on the other hand, that you feel somehow locked. So if I have one very first piece of advice to give to new young entrepreneurs today, start right away. Otherwise, it will get increasingly difficult to switch over time.
Exactly, because the other thing is, just as you say, you have a certain way of living, a cocoon, a bubble you are in, and then in order to step out of it, and there's also this view of failing fast. You not always fail, but if you do it early and do it fast. But how did you then get out of this bubble, between quotation marks, this comfort zone?
Yeah. I actually did it in 2 steps. First step was I became from an employee to a freelancer. That was step number 1. And then from freelancer to entrepreneur a few years later. And since I have a family, a mortgage, and so on, and family responsibilities, at each step, I had actually a very good control over the risks I was taking, because that was a must for me. I'm not a gambler at all. I want to keep control, and I still wanted to become my own boss, but not to lose, having the risk to lose everything. So practically, to go back in time again, after 8 years in consulting companies, I had, of course, reached some quite senior position. And at some point, I got responsible for optimizing the development costs of large IT projects using nearshore and offshore resources. That was my main job at some point. So I had a number of teams of developers reporting to me in Asia and in other regions of the world where salaries are much lower, basically. I remember traveling constantly between India, Malaysia, the Philippines, Morocco, south of Spain too. I was managing quite large projects for international companies with these teams. And over time, of course, I got closer to some of these developers in this region. And some of them were a little bit more ambitious than others. So I started my own company. That's my first step to entrepreneurship. I started my own company in Luxembourg in 2011 on top of my employee job. The name of the company was Technology Move. And the idea was basically to offer to SMEs, to small and medium companies, access to these offshore resources for their IT projects. Because, at that time, working with offshore resources was a strong trend. It's less now, of course, but now it was, back then it was really a strong trend, but it was somehow reserved to really large companies, because the setup costs are really high, because it's not easy to manage those guys remotely, so you have to travel a lot, and cultures are very different, and so on. So small companies couldn't afford to work with those teams, those remote teams, even if the salaries were much lower. But because I had the network there, and I knew how to manage these projects, I was able to offer these kind of services and resources to smaller companies. So in 2011 and 12, I was developing websites and simple mobile apps for really a fraction of the cost, of what you would have paid locally. I did a number of projects. It was still on top of my day job. I did a number of projects, and over time, actually, one of our customers became quite big for us at Technology Move. They were giving us more and more work, and gradually, actually, my company ended up working only for that customer. It was a Flemish company in Belgium. So I saw that an opportunity to start flying on my own. I knew that this Flemish company had a lot of needs, and I went to find the CEO and offered him to work full-time for his company as a freelancer, in addition to what Technology Move was doing. And this was accepted. So I left my employee position in 2013. And that's how I started in the world of entrepreneurship.
And when you did that move, this means you moved and had already at least one client, one customer, and who was worthwhile of doing it. This move from going fully to your client, was that a difficult decision, or would you say, okay, it was, as you explained, it was the right time to do it, and then to move on? Because very often, when you have somebody, I'm taking out a little bit of questions, when somebody is there, and in order to make the move, they are in parallel in two steps or in two phases, and they was it a quick one? Was it easy? I mean, would you say okay, but maybe you should have waited a little bit?
No, again, this was all under control. As I said, I did it in two steps. That was the first step, from employee to freelancer. I never lost control. So, the risk was too high, as I said, to lose everything. So when I resigned from my employee position, I had already signed a 1-year contract as a freelancer with that specific customer. So the risk of the transition was really under control. But it's only a first step to becoming an entrepreneur for me, because it wasn't a real entrepreneur in my eyes. I was sending invoice every month with a fixed amount to my client. So that's not what I call real entrepreneurship. So I will become a real entrepreneur later on, in the second step, a bit later. But that was already a first step. I was somehow not anymore an employee. But of course, I knew that I wanted to move from freelancer to entrepreneur, but I needed to do it in a secure way.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because I don't want to risk everything. So how did I do that? I actually worked for that Flemish company for 3 years as a freelancer. It was a company selling healthcare products. And I gradually became the founder's right-hand guy. And I earned some money in that position at that time. I also learned a lot from the company's founder, who is still a brilliant entrepreneur. And then in 2015, a few years later, I felt that I was ready to start my own company in Luxembourg. But once again, as you said, Steve, I wanted to keep the control and basically minimize the risk as much as possible. So I didn't switch to my own company from one day to the next, not at all. I actually continued to work in parallel for the Flemish company for a while, until I could see that the business of my own company was taking off. And then I went full time on my own company. So you see, not only I became entrepreneur in 2 steps, but also at each step there was an overlap, a clear overlap of at least 1 year between my professional life, between my previous life and my new life, to make sure that my new life was secure enough before switching.
Okay, that's one thing. But the other thing is, when you switched, as you say, the phase of becoming a real entrepreneur with your known company and so on, it's one thing to have one client, one customer. But how did you approach it to have different customers? Was that something which came step by step, or where you said, okay, I now feel secure, I can go for it? And as you said, you had this customer, and very often when you're depending on one customer, you also have a weakness. There's a risk because you are depend on them. How did you address that to get other clients, other customers, or develop in other areas of services or products?
Yeah. During the 3 years I've been an entrepreneur, a freelancer, to be really honest with you, I only had this one client. There were a myriad of companies, but it's still for the same client somehow. So I was sending different invoice to different companies, but in the end there was only one guy behind. And I couldn't say I had been able to mitigate that risk. That's also why I wanted at some point to fly on my own. Then when I started my own company, it was actually a B2C company. So totally different. There, it was really about selling every month products to private customers, and it developed well. To be honest, I ran this company successfully for 5 years. I was based in Steinzel. I had a team of around 15 people, and I was, so happy to be my own boss at that time. It was really a dream. Of course, coming with a lot of stress too. That's part of the entrepreneurial life. And then, unfortunately, the company died during COVID, because of the pandemic, basically. And that was really one of the worst moments in my life. To be honest, I got close to burnout at that time. I also lost enormous amount of money. All the savings I've done in the past were lost in this company dying because of COVID. But I've been a happy entrepreneur for these years.
Okay, and this company, I mean, you moved from service to B2C, and that company, when were you on your own, or did you have co-founders for that company? Because that's also a question which came is, did you set up as a sole founder or sole founder, or did you have co-founders?
I was solo, so I was really on my own. I was owning 100% of the shares. At some point in the journey, my brother actually, we are really working well together. My brother joined me for a period of time, but then left. So it was really a solo entrepreneur story, which is also coming with a lot of challenges, because when you are alone at the top of the pyramid, you feel really lonely at some point. When you have good news, of course, you are the king of the world. But when you have bad news, you have no one to talk to. You have no peers, you have no co-founders. I didn't have any investors, so I was really bootstrapped 100%. So I didn't even have a board to talk to or board members. So basically, that was the hardest part of that period of my life, is that I felt quite alone, particularly in the bad moments.
Then, I mean, how did you move on? Because where you are now, it's very, it's amazing what you already told us about what you are doing today. But how did you move on? I mean, what was the next step after that? Let's call it the first venture was finished. How did you see
Yeah,
the next venture or the next steps? How did you go about that?
yeah. When I was running this company that we just talked about, I was basically selling also healthcare related products from different brands on the Luxembourgish market. And I was looking for new products to distribute. So I went on the internet and I found one interesting allergy related product that I see maybe I could distribute that in Luxembourg, because I see that they are not selling in Luxembourg. So I called them. I got the CEO on the line. We had a very interesting discussion for an hour, and then we ended up to the conclusion that our business models are not really compatible, so we decided not to do business together. But we had a really good connection. And then, as I told you, my company died 1 year later because of the pandemic. The business was really relying on events and home visits, which were completely impossible, of course, because of the lockdown, and the company couldn't survive. But I still had a very good connection with that CEO that I talked to the year before. And one day he called me and told me that basically the board of that company, allergy company, pharma company, was looking for a new CEO. And that's how it basically, I got the opportunity to join and to go one step further to the world of VC, venture capital, because this company was backed by VCs. And joining that company as a CEO would basically put me in a position where I would report to venture capitalists. And that was my first connection with this world.
Yeah, please. And how did you, I mean, that's something completely different on, and how did you approach it? I mean, okay, you have a board, you have VCs, which are, or any investor which is looking for results. You have to report and so on. And of course, I guess it was also a regulated market or pseudo-regulated market where you are in. From coming from there, was it that you would say, okay, my skills were enough and to address it, or did you have to gather and rely on more people, be on more staff, on a team? Whereas, I mean, as you said, as most of us, we start small, we start on our own, or if we have the luck, we have co-founders. But if you start on our own, we are everything. We are the jack of all trades. And then we start to have a team. And how did you go about the team?
Yeah, this company was already existing for some years. It was not a new company, and they were looking for a new investor, a new CEO with a more business-oriented profile. They saw that I was an interesting candidate because I had my own company also in the healthcare industry. Okay, I didn't know anything about pharma and allergy. I had no idea about that. But in the end, they were not looking for a pharma guy. They were looking for a business development person who understands that indeed pharmaceutical products are not like there are certain rules. There's a strong regulation around that. So their idea was, okay, we need someone who can enable us to go online, to have our own e-shop, to start working in a more digitalized way, and to set up a CRM, and to really nurture leads and make sales out of digital marketing campaigns. And that's exactly what I did in the past in my company in Luxembourg. Really, I was a professional of Facebook ads, of Google ads, of all these environments, really hands-on, doing it myself. So I also had the experience of running a company, of course, all aspects of a company, because I created my own, so the human resources, accounting, finance, operations, and all those areas. So basically, that's how I joined the game. The company was relatively small in terms of headcount, so I could easily make my own place in the company somehow, and develop a good relationship with colleagues, clients, partners. We were selling also in pharmacies, so developing a network of pharmacists and so on, and yeah, that was quite successful. But what I really enjoyed, and that gave me even more this idea of becoming what I am now, is this relationship I had with VCs. On a regular basis, I had a board meeting, of course. I was also on the board. I was even chairman of the board for some time. This is a position that I really enjoyed, to be honest. because not only I was a CEO of the company running the day-to-day business, but I was also part of the board representing the shareholders. And there was around 4 million capital invested by shareholders in this company. So these guys didn't want to lose their money, of course. So representing their interests was also something I particularly enjoyed. So that's somehow the trigger for me. Okay, one day I will become also VC.
And on the other hand, I mean, if you look at it, and if you look now, well, in your portfolio companies or your potential targets and so on, they are also human beings. And what are you looking into the founders or those who run the companies you are going to invest in? What are you looking for in them? Not the companies per se, but now the people. We're talking people because, as you just said, it is a different world. It's also, you have different rules to play with. You have to report to somebody because they're using other people's money and so on. And eventually your decision span is a little bit reduced. It's not constrained, but a little bit reduced for the sake of, because those, when you invest or support a company, you support it because not only you have the resources, but you also have the experience, the expertise. So therefore, but that's one question, because which popped up here is saying, okay, yes, I have a company and I'm looking for investors, or would like to have somebody on board and so on, but I am a little bit afraid of how should I prepare myself for that step.
Oh, you mean as an entrepreneur? Okay.
Yes.
I will say it's, I'll focus on the funding part because, of course, now I'm a professional investor. And just to put that in the context, we've invested in 29 companies over the last 3 years. So we have accumulated quite some experience. And we know that above all, we invest in a team. Okay, there's a project, there's a product, but primarily the team will make it or not. And every investor knows that. I mean, a great team, even if the project is complicated, a great team will always find a way to give us a good return on our investment, one way or another. You know, they will pivot, they will find a way. So basically, we invest in people primarily. That's very important to understand. Now, with regard to funding, you know, there's really a before and a now. It's really important. There has been enormous changes in the recent years, and I think that entrepreneurs must absolutely realize that. It's very important that they take that into account. So until a few years ago, the focus was really on growth. So to raise capital under good conditions with investors, entrepreneurs had to show that the company was growing fast, taking market share, you know, grow. It didn't matter if the company was losing millions. As long as it keeps growing fast, then the entrepreneur will find additional funding along the way. The investors will be there. There were so many investors in the past who came to entrepreneurs with projects that were expected to be profitable in only 5 years or even more, you know, with several stages of funding already planned along the way. And investors were happy to finance these projects. So my advice for today's new entrepreneurs, please don't do this anymore. It's over. It's totally different now. Focus is on profitability.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, if the company isn't profitable or isn't going to become profitable quickly, then the investor got scared. And it's going to be very difficult for the entrepreneur to raise money in good conditions or even to raise money at all. But Steve, allow me please to explain why, because that's an interesting point, I think. Why we are in this situation, why the situation has changed so much. Well, in summary, a few years ago, investors had plenty of cash available to support entrepreneurial projects. Really a lot, for a number of reasons. I probably have no time to explain that right now. But this has basically led to an artificial increase in the valuation of many companies. You know, it's supply and demand. There was almost more supply than demand, almost more capital ready to invest than entrepreneurs looking for funds. So the logical consequence is that prices are going up, even if the company's fundamentals don't necessarily justify it. Now it's really the opposite. Due to many reasons, inflation, interest rates, Ukraine, others, there's now much less capital to support entrepreneurial projects than entrepreneurs looking for funds, which of course makes the situation quite challenging for the entrepreneurs raising funds right now, because there is much less supply than demand. So prices are going down, valuations are going down. We have seen massive declines in some industries, as you know, Steve, particularly in tech. So the consequence of this decline is that investors who invested at high valuation 2 years ago have now lost a lot of money, which makes, again, the situation even worse for entrepreneurs raising funds right now. And then with the much higher interest rates to companies who were planning to use bank debt, to finance themselves, now they have no other choice than to raise funds from investors, because they can no longer get loans from banks anymore, which means that there are now even more companies calling investors, which makes, again, the situation even worse for entrepreneurs looking for funds. Sorry, but that's the reality.
Yeah, and on the other hand,
so
No, go ahead. Sorry for that.
Just finishing, it's basically increasing this imbalance between supply and demand. So right now, every funding round for a non-profitable company is a risk of failure, is a potential bankruptcy. That's why investors are afraid to invest in unprofitable companies. So advice there for today's entrepreneur, again, which is almost the opposite of the one I would have given 2 years ago, but the situation is completely changed. Come to investors with projects that have the potential to become rapidly profitable, please. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult.
And on the other hand, I mean, you are talking about profitability. Does that mean scalability?
Scalability is absolutely key, of course, for an investor. So it's clear that we are interested in return on investment, and return on investment is going to be generated by a project that is growing in size, growing in revenue, growing in profit. And that can only be if the project is scalable. So it's obviously an essential selection criteria for investors today.
On the other hand, there's something popping up saying, okay, I know I have a venture, we are profitable, we get into contact with you and always others, and then we strike a deal, we develop well, we reach our profits, we are scalable and so on. And then is it worthwhile thinking about exit strategies as an entrepreneur early on? Or is it more to say, okay, let's first get this business profitable, get it up and running, and then think of potential exit strategies, whichever they may be?
It's a very interesting point again. Yes, I think it's essential to consider exit opportunities when you are raising funds, because investors, particularly at our stage, are dedicated. We also invest a lot in Series A companies. We go from Series A until pre-IPO investment opportunities, but clearly Series A is part of our sweet spot, and we are not meant to invest in a company for 10 years or 15 years. What we want is, the average period we are ready to invest our money is around 5 years. But it's clear that when we invest in a business, from the beginning, we are wondering, okay, what are going to be our exit opportunities? What kind of exit can we consider for that particular business, for that particular team? And the entrepreneur who understands from the beginning, when he's in the pitching session, who understands that the objective of the investor is to get a return on investment within around 5 years, is clearly going to have a higher chance of success. He should be, ideally, should be able to already have an idea of who is going to be interested to buy or to exit somehow. There are multiple liquidity events possible, but what are the possible scenarios? What is realistic and when? And even what are comparable multiples in the industries, if we invest in your business, because that's what we're going to calculate. If we invest in your business, we have seen similar businesses exiting at 10x, a multiple of 10 times the capital invested. And this is, of course, something that is really interesting for us. So having an idea not only of the exit opportunities, but also the exit multiples is clearly a very good signal for investors. Sometimes we see amazing pitches from amazing entrepreneurs, but that are so emotionally close to their business that considering even an exit for them is like, no, it's my baby. I will keep it forever. I will grow it. But okay, what are going to be the exit opportunities for us then as investors? If this person is so much emotionally attached to his business and will never sell anything to anyone, we know it might be conflicting in the future, we might have different interests. And it's obvious that for us, the management, so the CEO and the entrepreneur, should be as much aligned as possible with the investor interests.
Okay, thank you. And then there's another point always very often popping up and saying, okay, I'm ready. Okay, I'm ready, my venture's profitable. I'm ready to share the profits with you or somebody else so that you help me to grow and even grow bigger and scale and so on and to find an exit. But the question is, okay, how much shall I be willing to give away from my baby? Shall I be giving it, when shares and so on of my business, how much shall I be willing to give away? And also, shall I be giving it away immediately or foresee a little bit like a drag along clauses where either in the beginning, okay, I have to give it back, I have to give away quite a chunk of my shares, but there's a drag along that I can get back the shares if I reach a certain milestones, or the other way around. I keep more, but I have to give away more and more because of dilution effects and so on. What would be a good viewpoint for an entrepreneur in that area? Not you don't have to give any figures. It's just to the approach.
Yeah. You know, this is really going to be supply and demand. What I said earlier. The more you can show that your business has a high potential, the more, let me say it differently, the valuation, because this is what we're talking about here, the valuation of the company is going to depend on the risk. Of course, on the potential of the company, but also on the risk that the investor is taking. So the more you can demonstrate to the investor that the risk is under control, we talked a lot about under control, having the risk under control. Well, that's an area where the entrepreneur should really have as much as possible the risk under control for the investor. So he should be able to demonstrate that there is ideally already an MVP, a product market fit, that there is some kind of signals that this business is really scalable. And I could give a lot of advices like this, but basically the more you can demonstrate to the investor that the risk is under control, the more you will be in a good position to negotiate a high valuation for your project. And of course, you should also demonstrate that you can that the business can develop and scale. But you see what I mean. So you will be or in a position or you are in a really good position, and indeed what you say is probably something I would advise: give a small piece of the cake, or give a bigger piece and have a possibility to get it a piece back later in the future. Why not? Investors, we're open to any option, as long as it's a good deal, as long as it's a win-win. And by the way, it's going to be very important for investors to make sure that the entrepreneur is happy, is motivated. We have already seen some deals that we have refused because we estimated that it was not enough a good deal for the entrepreneur. That's very, very important to understand. For entrepreneurs, that we are not there to kill them at all. I mean, come on, it would be suicide for our money, you know? So we are there to make sure that there is a win-win, a good balance between the risk we take as entrepreneur when we invest in a business and the motivation that the entrepreneur will have to be successful. If he only ends up with 10% of the company already after the first round, then forget it. I will never invest, because we know that there is not enough skin in the game for the investors, not enough motivation to win, you know. So we are partners in this story. Entrepreneurs, investors are of course supporting with money. They are also happy to support with experience, with network, with everything. And it needs to be a win-win, otherwise it's never going to work. Okay. If you allow me, Steve, you told me we are reaching the end, and there's something I'd like to share, some advices, because I thought about what would be interesting to share in my own experience, and I'll be happy to answer your question immediately afterwards. When we had a quick talk about this session, you told me that at some point it would be interesting to share maybe what I would have done differently. And if you allow me, I'd like to answer that.
Please, that would have been my other question, which was popping up. But go ahead.
Yeah, but I see time is running. I don't know how you are with time, you know, Steve. But,
no, we have ample of time,
this
but
one is,
the audience. Great. Go ahead. No, really, what would you have, as you said, what would you have done differently with hindsight?
sometimes I wonder what my life would have been, if I've made different choices. And I'm sure many of us think about that. I have personally regretted some of my decisions afterwards. At certain turning points in my life, maybe I should have done things differently. But Steve, the problem with life is that you only get one chance to make each decision. And without realizing it, we are making decisions almost on a daily basis, some of which having a massive impact on the course of our life. So of course, it's preferable not to make too many mistakes because you can never go back, right? It's actually reminding me of a book I read a few years ago from Milan Kundera. I don't know if you know. The name of the book is L'insoutenable légèreté de l'être. I have no idea what's the English title. But it basically says that when you go to the theater to see a play, by William Shakespeare or whatever, the actors on stage have rehearsed each scene dozens of times before performing it live for the public, right? And if they make a mistake, it's no big deal. They can just do it again until they get the right version, until they are prepared for the evening of the live show. So they have the opportunity to do a lot of rehearsals, these actors. They repeat, they get prepared before they are live in front of the public. If you compare that to real life in which each of us is the main actor somehow, unfortunately, we only have one shot. There's no rehearsal at all. It's like asking a theater actor to perform a play live in front of the audience without any rehearsal beforehand. Good luck, yeah?
It's more like improvisation.
And that's exactly the story. Sorry?
It's more like improvisation.
Yeah, that's exactly the story of our life, Each of us, we only have one shot. We can't go back in time. That doesn't exist. If we make a mistake, well, we have to accept it and move on. And when we make decisions, a turning point in our professional life, for example, it's done. You can still try to fix the situation later if you realize that the decision was not the right one, but you can never change the initial decision. And we make decisions every day. So I would say that I've made 2 bad decisions in my life, and maybe it can inspire some people. That's why I'd like to share them. If I go back in time, I would do some things differently. Mainly, I've made some decisions in my life for the wrong reasons. And one example of wrong reason is ego. Let me give you one example. In 2004, when I left Accenture, what I'm telling you is something I've never said actually. So that's quite funny. But I left Accenture because I didn't get promoted as fast as some of my colleagues. I did not accept the feeling that I was not as good as some colleagues who joined the company at the same time. And that was the only reason why I left. So I don't know what would have been my life if I would have stayed at Accenture at that time. But what I know is that this decision was taken for the wrong reason. Honestly. So I can give you, unfortunately, other examples of that, but basically the first advice I would give is don't make decisions based on ego. Don't make important decisions based on ego. That will never give
Yeah, and
something good.
and on the other hand, also what one's noticed quite often is that very often not only the decisions on ego, but also even if you, as you said, when you are in discussion with partners or investors, if the ego is too strong and you are not eager or open to hear, to listen, to adapt, that it will become difficult, or not only with your own partners invest, but also with your clients, with your customers, because they also have their needs, their wants.
Let me bounce on that, because that's a very strong point according to me. It's on 2 occasions in my life I made rather harsh decision based on what I initially agreed with someone based on the contract. So anyone who knows me will tell you that I'm a very, very structured person. I'm very square,
You're an
which I
engineer.
think is a quality. I'm an engineer, clearly, which I think is a quality. But sometimes I'm too square, and then it's not a quality anymore. If that's written in the contract, then if that was the initial deal, then I apply it without sufficiently taking the human aspect into account. And on these 2 occasions, I will not give examples, we don't have time for that, but I was too square. Okay, I made a little bit of money with these decisions. But on the other hand, the relationship with the person was damaged, which in the end cost me much more than the little extra I earned. So sometimes put the contract aside and think about the human aspect and the perception of your decision. So if I could go back in time, I would clearly make those decisions differently. But I can't. Milan Kundera said it. There's no rehearsal, right? We're live on stage at every moment, shooting the movie of our life, and we just do the best we can.
Exactly, and then also we learn. With each step we learn, and then our performance gets a little better.
Of course, that's the idea.
So, and now looking a little now forward a little bit, as you said, that there's been already at that time it was this, now it's like this. And how is it? Do you see it moving forward? And how would you say, okay, how should the entrepreneurial ecosystem adapt or prepare itself for what you think you see forward coming?
You're talking about Luxembourg specifically?
No, on the whole, up to you. I mean, it's not really, because Luxembourg is not an island, but if you say Luxembourg, yeah, why not? I mean, but you can even elaborate abroad. It's no open.
I already talked about the funding conditions. It's of course something that absolutely needs to be taken into account by entrepreneurs. Think about profitability from the beginning. It's hard to predict, honestly, how the entrepreneurial ecosystem is going to evolve. We see that many things are right now in place or in motion to have more and more entrepreneurial projects, to support more and more entrepreneurship. But on the other hand, as I said, there is less and less capital available. Now, there are much more alternatives than in the past for investors. Again, related to what I do now, you can find very interesting investment opportunities in other asset classes where you have already high interest rates for zero risk sometimes. Whereas we know that venture capital is a quite risky asset class. So I remain a fan of venture capital because it's not only investing in, it's not only an asset class, it's people, you know, it's entrepreneurial stories, it's people changing the world, it's an amazing energy, and it's really to me now, ending up in VC is like a dream coming true. Being able to support entrepreneurial projects in the way I do now is so much. It's really something I was hoping to come someday. So it's some kind of achievement for me to get there. By the way, what I'd like to do in addition to that is basically to continue, of course, at Dedicated, where we do and we select amazing projects, and we have, by the way, amazing results so far in terms of return on investment for our investors. So the story is very positive. We support a lot of projects financially, but on the personal level, I also would like to support projects by sharing experience and spending time with entrepreneurs, and which is not necessarily something we have the opportunity to do with Dedicated because we invest in large corporates. Most of the time we like, you know, right now we're investing in, we have invested in SpaceX, in Airbnb. Of course, these companies don't need our support, but personally, and that's one of the next steps for me, is to grow now as an independent director in parallel with my with my investment activities at Dedicated, which of course remain my main focus. I'd like also to be able to support entrepreneurial projects or even funds and asset managers in basically sharing my experiences, talking with entrepreneurs, meeting projects, and adding experience in that way. Also, the network is absolutely important, of course. So that's one of my objectives now, is in parallel with my investor activity to also grow as an independent director in Luxembourg.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Benjamin, for sharing all this, and also sharing your past, and also giving some bits of wisdom to, on the one hand, budding entrepreneurs, but also those who are already the neck into the business and are grinding every day their business in order to scale it and develop it. And also, like one of the values of Startup Grind is to give. You give now, you intend now also to give back with your experience, with your directorship and anything else. So that is really great. And again, thank you very much for sharing the experiences during this fireside chat. I hope it was as enjoyable for you as it was for me, and I guess also for the audience. And looking forward to many more projects of yourself, and eventually some for one or the other of the viewers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.